Welcome back, another episode. The relationship between Voight and Chapman has been intriguing yet slowly growing. He has expressed his love for her and pledged to support her as she pursues her career. Similar to his relationships with other female coworkers, theirs is almost paternalistic. And that has a double-edged effect because it suggests that he is conscious of what he does for the people he loves and wants to protect, how the weight of that obligation impacts them personally, and conversely how it strains or tarnishes the relationship he forms with them. Voight understood the significance of the Morales case for Chapman and the burdens it has left on her since Villar's terrible death. Morales was essentially her lifeline, both personally and professionally. She wanted justice. The decision to imprison this man for the remainder of his life involved several factors, and Chapman had reached that stage. It goes without saying that Voight didn't want anything to put that for her in jeopardy, so it was a wonderful opportunity for the series to examine jury manipulation, and the extremes Voight would go to in order to blur the boundaries in order to protect the trial. The case should have been a slam dunk because everything was set up flawlessly. In addition to Chapman playing on the jury's emotions to make sure they grasped the gravity of how wicked a guy Morales was, Voight's testimony was scathing and emotive. Morales was essentially her passion because she wanted justice personally, and because it was a way to advance her career. Chapman arrived at a time when a lot of things were interwoven into locking this man up for the rest of his life. Voight naturally didn't want anything to put that in jeopardy for her, so it followed that this was the ideal case for the series to explore jury tampering, and the lengths Voight would go to in order to break the rules in order to protect the trial. The situation was ideal, and winning the case ought to have been simple. Voight's testimony was harrowing and vivid, and Chapman also appealed to the jury's emotions to make sure they realized the gravity of how terrible Morales was a man. The case would suffer and they would have to reopen if Chapman and the courts were made aware of the jury tampering. In addition, there was a danger that Morales' men may kill Julia in the encounter. Yet, the recurrence of these events can be worrying. Voight and Haley were back together after 5 minutes, with Haley serving as his clumsy second as he suggested further nefarious antics. If Chapman and the courts learned of the jury tampering, the case would suffer and they would have to go through this all over again. Also, there was a danger that Morales' men may kill Julia. Nonetheless, one might be concerned given how often these events occur. In less than 5 minutes, Voight was back alone with Haley, using her as a flaky second while he suggested additional illegal shenanigans. Voight had no choice but to use the entire crew this time, including Trudy, due to the limited amount of time they had to find Julia and reassure Christopher before he cast his final vote to decide Morales' fate. While working from books allows for some independence, it can also make their task more difficult, especially given their time limits, because you can't always hide behind the official channels. Voight didn't mind taking the enormous risk, which reminded us of earlier episodes of the series when Voight deviated from the rules, used force, and even broke the cage. Of course, this was much more subdued. In that regard, I'm not sure whether fans of the show who yearn for its earlier iterations will appreciate the effort to provide a taste of what it once was or get more miffed that they still have a leash on Voight than in the past. On the other hand, seeing Ochoa reject the bait right away was quite satisfying. He knew that if they had enough evidence to work with, they wouldn't have picked him up in a surveillance van and dumped him in a basement instead of booking him. The fact that he and his wife will have to vanish after all of this makes for a bittersweet conclusion, and one can only hope she recovers well from her significant brain bleeding. We don't see nearly as much badass Voight action as we used to, so the sequence where he saved her with a single-handed weapon while also killing 2 criminals was fantastic. Yet it still irritates Chapman that Voight is keeping her in the dark, and she has every right to be upset about it. Voight approaches everything with the attitude that he is the expert. There comes a moment when he needs to take this into account, even though he doesn't mind offending others or acting like the bad guy to protect the same individuals he cares about. Chapman makes a valid point, but you have to wonder whether it was lost in all the other chatter, much like when members of the unit secretly gave him a disapproving glance. And when Voight is right when he is right and right when he is wrong, those who legitimately disagree with him, like Chapman in this instance, fall into the trap of coming off more as irksome than anything else. Because of Voight's activities, justice ultimately won out, thus everything is good in the end, right? We'll have to watch how this affects Voight and Chapman's relationship and if they even try to pursue it after this or just write it off as a petty ethical debate between coworkers that never takes root or deepens. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe our channel.